Yo, what up? It's your boy, Mr. E, and today we're going to be practicing with equations, tables, and graphs. So, over the last couple of weeks, you guys have been getting a lot of practice in with equations, tables, and graphs, and you should feel really good about taking an equation, changing it into a table, taking a graph, changing it to an equation, and going vice versa between these three areas. But what I wanted to do today is practice a little bit with these and show you guys a couple tips and tricks when it comes to creating these types of things because the STAR test can be tricky and they like to throw some things at fifth graders that might cause some people to trip up a little bit, but we're going to try to avoid those things in this video today. So let's dive straight into the practice problems. All right, for this first problem, it looks like we have an equation. And something I noticed right away is that this equation has decimals. Yeah, they like to throw some decimals and fractions in on you, but we can totally handle this. What I would do is I would start with what we have here, and I notice that we have an additive relationship. So I know that I'm going to be adding as I go from left to right. I also know when I create my graph that it will not go through the origin. So that's something that's going to be important to keep in note. I'm going to take this equation and change it to a table first, okay? And the cool thing about when you're creating these types of things is you can create it however you want to. So that's how we're going to do it. So what I want to do is find out what y is when x is 0. So 0 plus 2.5 would give me 2.5. We'll move on to 1 now. So 1 and 2.5, that would give us 3.5. And then 2 plus 2.5 would give us 4.5. I know some of you guys are probably cringing right now. Mr. Ellsbury said 0.5. Sorry, 4 and 5/10. That's the more proper way to say it. So we've created a table. Now it looks like we can start making our graph. Now to make our graph, something that I've always said is pretty helpful is to create that third column so that we can have our ordered pairs. If this is something that's super easy for you and you can see the ordered pair without it, you're more than welcome to skip this step, but I like doing it. So we'll go 0, 2 and 5/10. We'll go 1, 3 and 5/10. And then we'll go 2, 4 and 5/10. Okay, so we have our ordered pairs now. We can graph it on our coordinate plane. I'm noticing that they didn't really give us any numbers here. So I think this is actually going to be super useful to us because now we can create it how we want to. I'm actually going to skip count here, okay? That way we have a line to represent halfway between our numbers. So halfway between 0 and 5, or halfway between 0 and 1 would be 0.5. Halfway between 1 and 2 would be 1.5. So I think I'm going to leave a little space in between to give us a little room to rock and roll with this, okay? So we have our first ordered pair at 0 and 2.5. So we don't need to go horizontally at all. We'll just go straight up to 2.5 or 2 and 5/10 and create a point right there, okay? So that's going to be 0 and 2.5. Okay, next one is 1 and 3 and 5/10. We'll go over 1 and then up the elevator to 3 and 5/10. And then we'll label that. So 1 and 3 and 5/10. Then our last point we created was 2 and 4 and 5/10. We'll create a point right here and then label it. Again, labeling isn't necessary as well, but as we're first learning, I think it's a good idea. And then we'll just draw a line. Hopefully my line won't be too, getting a little crazy with it, but it's okay. It served its purpose. And we created our graph here, okay? So we know it doesn't go through the origin, so we know it's additive. We've created our graph, we've created our table, and we were able to do that all by just starting with a simple equation. So pretty easy to do this with decimals as well. We just got to be familiar with how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide with decimals. And then when we're creating our graph, we can definitely skip to kind of help us make our graphs a little bit better, and we can represent halfway through as decimals and fractions and things like that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. All right, in this next problem, I'm noticing we're starting with the table, and this table is a little different. Instead of a vertical table, we have a horizontal table, which means it goes side to side. This is super easy though. We can do this. You're going to see a lot of tables that go horizontally instead of vertically. The one thing we do really need to make sure though is which one's the x coordinate and which one's the y coordinate. Sometimes they flip-flop these around, but typically x will come before y. So we're going to look at our rule as we go from x to y. So we go from 3 to 6, 4 to 8, 5 to 10. It doesn't look like this is going to be additive because it looks like our numbers increase a lot as we go down the table. So it looks like we're multiplying by 2. So the equation I would write would be y equals 2x. You could also write it as x times 2, but this is the more familiar way we'll see it. And then we'll start creating some ordered pairs. So I'm going to create this third, I guess this would be a row to create our ordered pairs. So we have 3, 6. We have 4, 8. And we have 5, 10. All right. So again, it's blank for us, so we can add it in ourselves. So I'm just going to go counts by ones, okay? All right, we got it now. All right, so we've got 3, 6. We start at the origin. We move over, walk into the building, and then go up to 6. So our first point will be right here. And then we move over to 4, move up to 8 for our second point. And then we move over to 5 and up to 10. Now, something I know is because we're using multiplication, this is going to be multiplicative. Okay, so multiplicative. So I know since it's multiplicative that it's also going to pass through the origin. So I know one of my first points will be down here. So then I can draw some lines in between here. Hopefully we can make a little bit of a better line. Not bad. Not our best, but not bad. Okay. And we've created our graph. We've got our equation. We've got our table. We've got our graph. Super easy. As we do this, you're going to notice I'm going to do it a certain way. If we wanted to start with the graph first before we did the equation, that's totally fine too. But it looks like we got all three and we're good to go. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. All right, it looks like we're starting with a graph here. And something I noticed is we do have a bonus question at the bottom. We'll focus on that a little bit later. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple points on this graph to help us create our table. First thing I notice is that there's nothing at the origin. So I already know this is going to be an additive relationship. So we're working with addition or subtraction here. I'm going to create a couple points on the line. Doesn't really matter exactly where we put it, as long as it's easy for us to read and we can rock and roll pretty quickly through this, okay? So we've got our table. We're going to have the x on the left and our y on the right. So when x is 4, y is 0 because it is not increasing at all. So next one, we're going to draw a line down, and it's going to intersect with the x-axis. That's going to give us 12. And then we'll draw a line to the side to intersect with the y-axis. That gives us 8. And then up here, we've got 18 for x. And we've got 14 for y. All right. So since it's additive, I know we're doing addition or subtraction. It looks like it's decreasing as we're going from left to right. And it looks like it's decreasing by 4. So we're going to call this y equals x minus 4. Now, something that I'm noticing is we do have a bonus question here, and it's asking when x equals 11, what does y equal? I'm not seeing the number 11 on my x-axis, but something that I can do is I can take a notice that there's 10 and 12 right here. Halfway between 10 and 12 would be 11. So I could just draw a line from 11 up to the line, and then draw a line where it meets on that line. And halfway between 6 and 8 would be 7. So I can use that line to kind of predict other points on the graph for me. So sometimes on these types of questions on the STAR test, you're going to have to look halfway between some points, but it's super duper easy to do. Don't freak out if you don't see the number there. So that's how we can take tables, graphs, equations, and we can flip them around, change them to other things, and it's pretty easy. So you should feel super confident after watching this video that you can take an equation, a table, or a graph and change it to anything that you want. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you get some practice with tables, equations, and graphs so you can get a hundo on your next test. Keep learning, Elsbros. Some new things from it and do it with pretty easy confidence, okay? God, that was awful. No, we're starting that all over. Throw that whole thing away.